Hey guys, tonight we travel deep beneath the hills of ancient Korea, where the summer air swells thick like rice porridge, and the only true relief lies hidden underground in stone-lined chambers. So cold, you can see your breath. You're standing under a silver moon, brushing aside ferns and moss, peering at a door that shouldn't exist in this humidity. It's thick, wooden, iron-banded, almost breathing with cold. You push it open, and a gust of air whispers out like a forgotten winter sigh. Inside, it's dim, the kind of darkness that seems to weigh more than it should. The smell, damp stone, earth, and something faintly sweet like pears stored too long. Your sandals scrape softly on the first step down. Each one drops you closer into the hush, away from crickets and fireflies and sweating villagers. You reach the bottom, and a room opens up vaulted stone, soot-stained walls, a floor dusted with frost. You place your hand on the wall. Cold, not refrigerator cold, deep. Living cold, the kind that belongs in January, not June. You probably wouldn't survive this century. No air conditioning, no fans beyond handheld paper ones, no iced lattes or frozen grapes. And yet somehow they did it, with science, sweat, and just a bit of superstition. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from somewhere humid or freezing or floating somewhere in between, post your location and local time below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background. Hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pause at the doorway, already a little sleepy from the cool embrace of the cellar. You don't know it yet, but this simple room beneath your feet once fed empires, cured headaches, and made emperors sweat a little less under layers of silk. You step farther in. The roof curves overhead like the shell of a great stone turtle. Not one breeze stirs, yet you feel chilled. Welcome to the Taenyu. The word sounds playful, but to the people of the Joseon Dynasty, it was serious business. Taenyu weren't just cool caves, they were life-saving technology. And unlike the flashy palaces and golden ornaments, they were hidden. No parades, no trumpets, just stone, air, and time. You run your fingers along a chiseled groove on the wall. Drainage channel. Practical. A small hole in the corner. Air vent. Ingenious. And that patch of soot overhead probably from the candles servants used when they came at night. Carefully balancing trays of fruit or bowls of tofu or, yes, even ice cream. Sort of. Outside, someone calls in the distance. A sharp whistle. You squint through the open door and see a flickering torch bobbing toward you. Time to return. You step back out, just for a moment, and already you feel the slap of summer. The air is heavy with humidity. Cicadas scream in the trees. The earth itself seems to sweat. And now, as you glance back at the cellar, you realize this wasn't just about luxury. It was survival. A battle against heat fought not with machines, but with memory, with strategy, with knowing how to make cold last longer than it should. Up ahead, a path winds down toward a flickering village. You decide to follow it, just to see where the story leads. Somewhere, a bell tolls once, maybe twice. Time blurs in this place, And that's okay. You're safe. Cool. Surrounded by ancient ingenuity, you trudge toward the next chapter in the soft dust of the path, still feeling the chill clinging to your skin like a forgotten ghost of winter. You step again into the cool stone chamber. Your feet echo softly against the flagstones. The air still and ancient. It's not just colder down here, it's quieter. A kind of quiet that seems to fold around your ears, pressing inward, asking you to listen, not to sounds, but to time. This is no ordinary cellar. You glance around. The stones aren't haphazard, they're perfectly stacked, layered like puzzle pieces carved from volcanic rock. The ceilings slope in a subtle arch, forcing any warm air that dares to enter to drift up, ward and out, and the floor slanted ever so slightly to let melting water drain into deep-set channels that vanish into the ground. You crouch beside one of those channels and run a finger through the damp groove. It's slick, not just wet icy. Yes, even now, hundreds of years later, this room hasn't forgotten its purpose. A breath of wind rolls through the chamber. Not from outside, there are no windows, but from the earth itself, sighing through hidden vents. A ghost of winter, exhaling after centuries of silence. It's colder now. You wrap your arms around yourself without realizing it. This is deeper than the kind of cold you buy with electricity. It's bone deep, memory deep. You wonder, how did they build something like this? With no modern tools, no concrete, no chemical refrigerants. Just stone, sweat, and know-how passed down like family secrets. Back then, this room wasn't empty. It held a precious load ice blocks, each one carved from frozen rivers during the dead of winter, stacked and layered with straw and ash to slow the melt. It worked, even as spring turned to summer. The cold remained. The cellar didn't just store ice, it protected it, respected it. You pace the perimeter slowly, tracing your hand along the grooves in the walls. Every inch has a purpose: sloped ceilings for airflow, double doors for insulation, walls dug into shady hillsides to stay cool even under a blistering sun. You realize that these builders weren't guessing. They understood thermodynamics before it had a name. Above you, someone walks past on the grassy hill. You can hear the faint crunch of sandals in dry grass. They're probably headed to the palace kitchens. Maybe they're fetching a bowl of chilled persimmon soup. You imagine it, smooth, sweet, icy. The kind of thing you'd gulp to fast and regret with a brain freeze. But for the Joseon Dynasty elite, a brain freeze was a flex. It meant you had access to the impossible cold in summer. That's why these cellars were guarded, locked, revered. Ice wasn't just refreshment. It was power. Stored cold equaled status. You sit on a stone ledge, the temperature seeping through your clothes like a polite warning. Not too long. Don't linger. This is a place for purpose, not naps. Still, you close your eyes for a moment. Imagine this scene. Servants trotting down narrow paths with bamboo baskets lined in waxed paper. Inside small cubes of ice, trembling with the effort of staying solid. Behind them, a noble's breathless child waits in the courtyard, shaded by silk umbrellas, already licking her lips. "Where's my ice candy?" she calls. On its way, the servant pants, clutching the basket like treasure. You open your eyes and smile. People really haven't changed that much. A craving is a craving, no matter the century. But it wasn't all sweetness and novelty. You move toward the far wall, where a pile of worn tools lies half buried in dust. A wooden bucket with iron bands, a rusted scoop, and a broken sign with faded brush strokes. Maybe it once warned, "Do not enter," or "Royal ice keep out." Historians still argue whether these tools belonged to palace servants or local villagers allowed to store their own small supply in exchange for labor. Some records suggest a complex rotation system. Others hint at bribery access bought with favors and rice cakes. You lean against the stone and feel its ancient breath. The cellar doesn't answer, of course. It just listens, as it always has. There is a fringe theory half-whispered by eccentric scholars that Tengu like this weren't just for storing ice. They were temperature temples, part of seasonal rituals lost to time. According to one old monk's scribbled journal, meditating in cold chambers was believed to sharpen clarity and cool the blood's impurities. Supposedly, some monks could sit in here for hours, barely clothed, emerging with minds like clear water. You glance around. It does feel like a sanctuary. The stillness, the hush, the way your thoughts slow like syrup. Then again, that could just be the chill numbing your nose. A drip echoes from the ceiling. You look up. A single bead of water slides along the stone and falls into a narrow crack in the floor. The system is still working. After centuries, you head for the exit. Each step upward brings a shift in the air warmer, louder, alive with insects and distant bells. The outside world waits. Bright. Humid. Sticky. But you already miss the cold. At the door, you turn back one last time. The chamber is still, quiet, patient. It's not just a room, it's a time machine. A reminder that even without buttons and screens, human beings have always known how to shape the world to their will. You step into the sunlight, blinking. It's mid-afternoon now, the heat pressing down like a hand. In the distance, you hear laughter from a stream and the crack of a wooden ladle against a clay bowl. You smile. The ice will melt, yes, but the cellar will wait. It always does. You step down the path toward the village, swatting at a lazy fly buzzing around your ear. The cool memory of the Tengu clings to your skin, but the sun wastes no time reclaiming you. Sweat beads along your temple. It's midsummer in 15th century Korea, and the air feels like soup dense, steaming, spiced with wood smoke and the distant tang of fermenting kimchi. You pass women fanning red pepper paste on straw mats. A boy splashes in a wooden tub, squealing as his sister pours ladlefuls of water over his head. And there, beneath a crooked paper umbrella, a rice seller snoozes, head tilted back, mouth wide open, completely surrendered to the heat. You trudge through it all, the way people did centuries ago, day after relentless day, and you start to understand something. This heat isn't just uncomfortable, it's oppressive. It slows you down, drains your appetite, clouds your thoughts. Some days it feels like it is trying to pin you to the earth and boil you like a dumpling. And yet, life thrived. Koreans of the Joseon Dynasty didn't just endure summer, they planned for it. Seasonal rhythm shaped everything. Work schedules, meal types, prayer rituals. When the cicadas screamed the loudest, it was time for barley tea, breezy hemp clothing, and midday naps under trees. Farmers rose before dawn, then rested through the punishing noon glare, only to return to the fields as the shadows stretched long and gold. You wander past a small pavilion where a group of elders sit cross-legged, playing boduk and sipping chilled plum tea. Not iced, mind you, just cool, stored in shaded jars half buried in the ground. They nod as you pass, unfazed by the heat. This is their pace, slow, patient, deliberate. A chicken waddles past your path, feathers slightly puffed as if it, too, is asking, "Why must the sun be so personal today?" You duck into a shaded courtyard, where the relief is immediate. Here, the air stirs slightly, bouncing off pale clay walls and creeping over floor tiles still damp from a morning rinse. A servant walks past carrying a fan made of oiled paper and bamboo slats. She barely flicks her wrist, but it's enough to conjure a breeze. You think of modern air conditioners, of thermostats and Freon and 21st century climate control, and suddenly it feels laughable. You're standing in a time when humans didn't conquer heat, they coexisted with it, built around it, respected it. Their weapons weren't mechanical, but architectural. North-facing homes, open courtyards, angled roofs that caught the wind like sails, and, of course, the hidden hero-sized cellars. But here's the irony. Not everyone had access. The Tengu you visited, reserved for the few, the elite, the well-connected, for the rest. Cooling off meant simpler things. Cold water from a deep well, a splash of rice wine stored in shade, or a visit to the stream at dusk. You wander down toward that stream now, your sandals sinking slightly into soft earth. Children's laughter echoes ahead, and soon you spot them barefoot, shrieking with delight, dunking each other in the shallows. A dog shakes off in a flurry, tail wagging. A grandmother watches from a rock, feet submerged, sighing with satisfaction. You kneel beside the stream and cup your hands. The water is shockingly cold. You splash your face, and for a moment, all the stickiness, the heaviness, the heat gone. Just a simple, ancient relief. Historians still argue whether these community water spots played a formal role. In seasonal health practices, some believe they were considered sacred during solstice festivals, protected by charms, and patrolled by monks who warned against overindulgence to much cold on a hot day invites. The spirits of fever, one temple inscription warns. But you suspect most people didn't overthink it. When it's hot, you cool off with whatever you have. Back at the village edge, a group of workers gathers under a silk canopy. A man, clearly in charge by the way he doesn't lift anything, barks orders as baskets of food are unloaded. Cold noodles, chilled radish slices, and wait is that a covered dish of something frosty. You inch closer. The man lifts the lid dramatically, and a wisp of cold vapor escapes. The crowd murmurs. Inside, shaved ice, dyed pink with mulberry juice. They only made it once or twice a year, you're told. The ice came from the royal stores, traded or gifted, and had to be used immediately. You notice how everyone crowds the server, not just for a taste, but to see it, to feel it. It's not dessert, it's an event. A boy sneaks up behind you and pokes your ribs. You've never had pat bingsu. Ha, he grins. Then he runs off laughing. You laugh too. He's right. And suddenly you crave it. That soft crunch, that melt on your tongue sweetness, that momentary escape from heat. But the dish is empty before you get a chance. Still, the moment lingers. A collective pause, a small rebellion against the tyranny of summer. You retreat to a shaded bench and watch a group of women fanning themselves. Their conversations drifting from recipes to gossip to herbal remedies. One swears by lotus leaf baths. Another claims her husband sleeps with a cabbage leaf on his forehead. A third insists the best solution is mental. If you stop thinking about the heat, it stops thinking about you. You try that trick. It doesn't work. Still, something settles in your chest. A kind of admiration. These people, your people now. For this one quiet night have built a life not in spite of discomfort, but alongside it. They've learned when to resist, when to surrender, and when to slip into the cold belly of a stone cellar and simply breathe. You close your eyes for a moment, the breeze catching the edge of your sleeve. Somewhere in the hills behind you, the Tangyu waits, still cold, still listening. You wake not from sleep, but from the kind of trance that only warm sun and rhythmic village sounds can lull you into. A distant bell chimes the hour. You rise from the shaded bench and head uphill, drawn by the soft clinking of ceramics and the swish of silk. The palace is near. You can feel its presence before you see it less a place, more a mood. Structured calm, controlled beauty, a breeze that somehow knows where to blow. You walk through an open wooden gate carved with clouds and cranes, past guards who barely glance your way. You're invisible here, but not unwelcome. The courtyard shimmers in heat. Sandaled feet pad across polished stone. You hear the flap of fans, the low murmurs of important people doing nothing urgently. There's movement on the shaded veranda. A servant in pale green robes carries a lacquered tray balanced perfectly. On it a bowl of chill sliced pears, their pale flesh gleaming like little moons. A pair of ceramic cups holds water, so cold it's beaded with condensation, like sweat made elegant. Another tray follows, this one with sweet red bean jelly and a small dish of salted plums. The servant kneels, bowing low, before stepping back into shadow. The recipient of this tiny miracle, the Crown Prince, lounging on a padded platform under layers of embroidered silk. He looks miserable. A sheen of sweat paints his upper lip. His fan lies motionless beside him, his gaze distant. Even luxury has limits. You tiptoe closer. He picks up a pear slice, holds it for a moment as if waiting for it to apologize to him, then pops it into his mouth. You almost expect him to sigh. He does, but it's not enough. Not really. Not when your entire body feels like a steaming rice pot. The ice that kept this fruit chilled has already done its best and vanished. The prince shifts in his seat, lifts the cup of water, and sips. A droplet clings to his chin. Someone rushes forward with a cloth to dab it away. You blink slowly. The amount of human energy spent keeping one person marginally less sweaty is impressive, but not rare. Not here. In the Joseon court, ice wasn't a treat, it was a necessity, a sign of order, of control, nature's Chaos bent, however slightly, to royal will. Every summer, a carefully timed ritual unfolded. Ice blocks, harvested months before from frozen rivers, were brought from the Tangyu to the palace. Not all at once, no. That would be wasteful and unsightly. They came in rotations, packed with layers of straw and salt. Each batch calculated to last just long enough. And once they arrived, they weren't simply stored, they were honored. Royal meals included at least one chilled component: cold broth, frosted melon, even ice-scraped powders used for compresses or added to perfumes. You pause by the side, listening to the hushed conversation between two court ladies fanning themselves nearby. "Did you hear?" one says. "The Queen Dowager's chamber is 2 degrees cooler than the king's." The other gasps, scandalous. They giggle. You almost laugh too. Even temperature has politics here. You step deeper into the palace grounds, passing open rooms where shaded courtyards offer brief breezes. In one chamber, a physician carefully stirs powdered herbs into a bowl set atop a bed of crushed ice. He speaks softly to an elderly official seated beside him. "It must stay cool," he murmurs, "or the bitterness becomes poison." Historians still argue whether the cooling of medicine was purely practical or ritualistic. Some say cold transformed the energy of certain herbs, neutralizing their fire and balancing the body's internal elements. Others insist it was simply about taste and survival. Heat could spoil even the most precious root. You wander farther into the palace kitchens. Here, the air is thicker, busier. Steam rises from cooking pots. Women shout instructions, and somewhere, a firewood pile crackles defiantly. In one corner, a servant carefully slices tofu. Beside her, a wooden bucket of ice beads. With condensation, she dips the tofu in, lets it sit, then lifts it out with delicate tongs. Chilled tofu, served with a splash of soy and shaved spring onion. A palace favorite. Another servant pauses, carrying a narrow jar wrapped in silk. A passing official stops him. Wine, infused with chrysanthemum and cooled. The official nods approvingly. The Minister of Rites will be pleased. He's already sweating through his second robe. You shake your head. In this world, sweat is almost a political liability. Too much, and people whisper. Too little, and they suspect witchcraft. You finally find a quiet alcove, sheltered beneath a ginkgo tree. A small table holds 3 bowls of dessert half melted, sweet, earthy. You recognize them: sujiongwa, cinnamon punch. Served cold, always. Made with dried persimmons and a kick of ginger. Then cooled with slivers of ice to wake up the tongue. You dip a finger into one bowl. Still cold. In a time with no freezers, no refrigerators, someone made sure that this dessert hit the prince's lips at exactly the right temperature. And if it didn't, someone would pay for it. There's a strange comfort in that. The predictability, the devotion to routine. As if ice were a god, and each dish an offering. A guard pauses. You follow him out through a side gate, and onto a stone path leading toward the royal gardens. It's quieter here. The cicadas grow softer. The leaves hang still, thick with heat. But the memory of the chilled pear lingers on your tongue. The sharpness of it, the soft crunch, the feeling that, For one stolen bite, summer was defeated. You look back at the palace. Inside, more ice is melting, more servants are rushing, more fans flapping, all to keep one boy a little cooler for a little longer. And tomorrow, it starts all over again. You keep walking. The path curves behind the palace, and you follow it, tracing the ridge of the hillside. It's quieter here, away from the soft chaos of the court. The trees offer dapples of shade, though the breeze, if it exists, seems to be napping. You catch the scent of pine and something distant, maybe charcoal, maybe fermenting radish, and then you hear it, the rhythmic thwack of something being chopped. You round a bend and find a group of workers clustered around a stack of straw bundles. And what looks like, yes, actual ice, not bowls or shavings or decorative cubes, but massive, glistening blocks, stacked like frozen bricks. They shimmer, sweating slowly in the sun. It's July, and this ice, harvested 5 months ago. You stand back and watch. One man lifts a straw mat and carefully peels it back, revealing a near-perfect slab of crystal ice beneath. It glows in the light. Another worker quickly fans it with a square of parchment. It's all precise, practiced, almost sacred. This is where you learn the secret. How they trapped winter. In the coldest part of January, when the rivers froze solid, teams were sent out at dawn to saw into the ice. They worked in silence, bundled in layers of hemp and wool, sliding thick blades through the frost-covered surface like butchers of winter. Each block was a foot thick and heavier than most people could carry, and still they carried it. The blocks were wrapped in straw, packed onto ox-drawn sledges, and hauled slowly, deliberately to detain you. That part you already know. What you didn't know was how clever the storage was. You crouch near a small model a worker has drawn in the dust with a stick. A slope here, a vent there, a drainage tunnel just deep enough to keep the meltwater from pooling and speeding up the thaw. Each block was stacked with space between it and the next, allowing cold air to flow like breath between lungs. And between layers, more straw, more ash, more careful planning. Historians still debate the formula used for packing materials. Some say charcoal ash was critical. Others argue it was the angle of the cellar, or even the moon phase during storage. Yes, really. One royal architect insisted that I stored on. A waning moon lasted longer. No one dared contradict him. What's certain is this: it worked. You reach out and touch one of the blocks. It's cold, almost painfully so. A thrill runs through you. This ice has no business existing in summer. It's not just refreshing, it's miraculous. And yet, here it is, still here. A man with soot-smudged hands smiles at you and holds up a worn wooden measuring stick. This one, he says, tapping the ice, has lasted 108 days. He sounds proud, and he should be. You're not sure your modern freezer could beat that. Nearby, a group of boys play with slivers shaved from a melting block. They slip them down the backs of each other's shirts, squealing with delight. One boy holds a sliver on his tongue until it disappears. You can't help but laugh. That kind of joy never changes. The overseer calls out, and the workers begin wrapping the blocks again. They work fast. Every second exposed is a second closer to loss. You watch as they bind the straw tightly, securing it with strips of bark. Then roll the blocks back into the shade. A man grunts as he adjusts the tarp above the pile. He glances at you. Ice doesn't forgive laziness, he mutters. You nod solemnly. He's not being dramatic. He's being accurate. They say in the past, one misplaced block could cost a family an entire season of comfort or their standing in court. Ice wasn't just cold. It was currency, reputation, honor. You walk a little further and come across another Tangyu. This one partially buried in a shady slope, hidden behind a row of bamboo. It's smaller than the royal one, cruder, likely for village use or a noble household on the outskirts. You duck inside. It smells of clay and cool moss. The temperature drops immediately. No ice here now, but the structure is sound. The walls slope inward near the base, helping to trap cold air. The ceiling is domed not for beauty, but to prevent condensation from dripping back onto the stored ice, speeding melt. This is what you realize. These were ancient refrigerators, but smarter in some ways. No noise, no cords, no need for electricity, just understanding of airflow, of darkness, of how to make the earth do the work. A fringe researcher once claimed that these designs were inspired by Buddhist meditation caves, that they mimicked the curves of the human skull to preserve thought as well as cold. You doubt it, but you also find yourself staring at the ceiling a little longer than you meant to. A rustle behind you. A squirrel, probably, or maybe a spirit of summer, come to check on its enemy. You step back outside. The sun blinds you for a moment, and then laughter, shouting, footsteps. You turn and see a team of oxen approaching, dragging a cart heaped high with more straw bundles. Ice delivery. You flatten yourself against a tree as they pass. The driver calls out to a boy walking alongside. To the magistrate's house first. He's rationing the big ones again. The boy groans. Does he even eat the ice? Doesn't have to. Just owns it. The man shrugs. You can't help but think of modern-day hoarders. Freezers packed with things they'll never use. Simply because they can. Some things never change. As the cart disappears around the bend, you remain still. The trees whisper above. The path is warm underfoot. You close your eyes and try to imagine this whole system so elaborate, so coordinated, built just to keep one thing cold. And you realize something else. This wasn't just engineering. It was belief. Belief that ice could last. That winter could stretch across months of fire and sweat. That human will could shape seasons. You open your eyes, and the path ahead shimmers in the heat. You walk farther up the winding hillside, drawn now not by people, but by architecture, by the bones of the mountain itself that the Joseon engineers once carved and coaxed into submission. There's another Tangyu ahead, but this one is different, older. You can tell by the moss curling around its entrance and the slight lean of its support beams. It looks half swallowed by time, but inside, the cold breathes just the same. You duck into its stone mouth and pause as your eyes adjust. This one is smaller, humbler, likely used by a mid-ranking noble or an extended household. The air hugs you with a sharp chill, brushing away the sweat from your brow like an invisible hand. You step inside and trace the angles with your eyes. You're starting to see patterns now, design choices repeated like sacred geometry. The same inward slant of walls, the same domed ceiling, and just like the last, a narrow trench around the perimeter for meltwater. Except this one has a clever addition, a small ceramic bowl at the end of the trench to collect and measure the rate of melt. You crouch beside it. Ingenious. A kind of ancient sensor. A literal drip feed of information. You run your hand along the wall and notice something else. Faint scratches. Not haphazard. Not damage. Tally marks. 57, 63, 71. Someone was tracking the days. Maybe to record how long a particular stack of ice survived. Or maybe just to pass the time. After all, someone had to come check every day. Monitor the conditions. Rotate the blocks. Adjust the coverings. You can imagine it. A lone servant descending each morning, breath fogging in the air, checking ice like a banker checks gold. Historians still argue whether these blueprints were standardized across the kingdom. Some say yes, pointing to edicts and royal building codes. Others argue that design varied wildly depending on region, terrain, and family wealth. But this one feels personal. You notice a dip in the wall just big enough for someone to sit. A groove worn into the stone by years of bodies leaning, waiting, listening. You sit there now, just for a moment. The silence is thick, heavy. And then you hear it. A faint gurgle of water in the trench. A bird call far above. The soft creak of the wooden beam outside shifting with the sun. These cellars weren't just storage, they were systems. Entire blueprints built into hillsides and under homes. They weren't carved into nature. They partnered with it. A seamless alliance of earth and intention. You step outside again and follow a stone path that wraps behind the cellar. It leads you to a small clearing, now overgrown, but you can tell it was once maintained. Maybe it was a cooling yard, a place where harvested ice was unwrapped, sorted, and judged for quality. 3 steps down is a dry well, or maybe not a well at all. You peer in and realize it's a vent shaft. A vertical tunnel to pull warm air out of the cellar, part of the passive cooling system. You remember reading once about similar designs in other parts of the world. Persian yakkals. For example, dome-shaped ice houses built with thick clay walls and underground pits. And in ancient China, Bingjian, or ice cellars, were used to store winter's harvest for the emperor's summer pleasure. Even Rome had ice pits, filled with snow from mountaintops, compacted and protected with straw. But Korea's Tangyu? They were stealthier, blended into the land, smaller in scale, but no less effective, and somehow more elegant in their simplicity. You brush your hand over a flat stone and notice a faint symbol etched into it to interlocking waves. A maker's mark, perhaps, or maybe just a flourish. Either way, it's a fingerprint, a whisper across centuries. I was here. I built this. A boy appears nearby, leading a cow with a yoke. He stops to stare at you. This one doesn't work anymore, he says, nodding toward the cellar. You raise an eyebrow. The roof leaks. Water gets in during the monsoon. It's no good. You nod. Do you still use the others? He shrugs. Only the rich ones. Then he continues down the path, cow hooves clicking on the stones. It hits you. Again. just how fragile this system was. One crack in the roof, one forgotten vent, one missed check, and the whole cold balance collapsed. Ice gone, food spoiled, status tarnished. You turn back toward the cellar and notice a vine creeping along the outer wall. Nature reclaiming slowly, kindly, but firmly. Inside, the cold will last a little longer. Maybe a season, maybe two. But eventually, if left alone, even the most well-built Tangyu becomes just a cave. A memory. A story someone tells about how we used to keep things cool. But not tonight. Tonight, you stand where engineers once stood. You breathe the same cold air. You understand their intent not just to preserve ice, but to preserve agency. The ability to say, we won't let summer win. Not yet. You press your palm against the stone one last time. It's still cold, still fighting. You descend the hill as evening begins to bleed into the sky, the air softening slightly as if even the sun has grown tired of its own heat. The stone path leads you into another courtyard, this one bustling with activity. Laughter, clinking bowls, the soft flapping of fans. But what catches your eye is not the people, or the color of their hanbok, or even the smell of grilled rice cakes wafting through the air. It's the enormous block of ice being unveiled at the center. There it stands, like a frozen monument, resting inside a lacquered basin lined with polished stone. A dozen onlookers have gathered, murmuring in awe as the shimmering cube slowly exhales mist into the warm twilight. You edge closer, pretending to admire the carved wooden panel beside it, though your real interest is the ritual unfolding before you. A nobleman in crimson robes gestures with a long ivory pointer, explaining the origin of this particular block harvested from the Cheongyekan stream, stored in the southern Tangyu, carefully transported over 3 days. And now, he says with a flourish, it cools our tea. The crowd claps politely. A servant pours a ladle of hot barley tea into a delicate ceramic cup. Then he presses a slice of the ice into it with tongs. Steam curls. The ice crackles. Everyone leans forward slightly. You take a sip when offered. The tea is warm, but somehow smoother, less bitter. The contrast is subtle, but unmistakable. It isn't just the temperature, it's the idea. The presence of ice changes everything, makes the moment feel curated, considered. And that's the point. Here, ice isn't just a functional thing, it's a symbol of status, of refinement, of mastery over the elements. The nobleman smiles as guests nod in approval. You can almost hear the silent accounting in their heads. He has enough access to share, enough connections to waste some in tea. Historians have noted how deeply tied ice was to social rank in Joseon society. Access to a Tangyu was tightly controlled. The royal family had their own, of course. But even among nobles, the quality and quantity of ice you possessed or claimed to possess said a lot. You sip again. The tea is already lukewarm. That's the cruel truth of ice, isn't it? No matter how carefully harvested, packed, or stored, it always melts, always disappears. It is, by its nature, fleeting, and so it becomes the perfect luxury, beautiful, perishable, and always requiring replenishment. You drift from the crowd, now animated in gossip and polite envy. and move into a shaded veranda. A young boy sits with his father, watching the melting block with rapt fascination. "Can we touch it?" the boy asks. The father chuckles. "No, it's for looking. If we touch it, it goes faster." The boy frowns, then asks, "So why don't we keep it locked up?" The father considers this. Because things are meant to be shared, even if they don't last. That strikes you harder than expected. You glance back at the nobleman, now gesturing grandly toward another cart of refreshment-sized melon. Perhaps. The guests are visibly impressed, not by the flavor, necessarily, but by the chill. You watch as a young woman tastes a cube of melon, closes her eyes, and smiles. "It's like biting the moon," she whispers. You get it. The softness, the frost, the strange feeling of cold sweetness in the thick summer air. It's transformative. Not necessary, not logical, but magical. Briefly, a boy stumbles past carrying a tray of crushed ice with syrup. He trips slightly, and one of the bowls slides off, hitting the stone floor with a soft plop. Silence. The boy freezes, and then laughter. The nobleman waves it off. "The heat must be jealous," he says. The crowd relaxes, but you notice something. The servants rush in quickly, silently, and the boy disappears from sight. You're not sure if he's being comforted or disciplined. This is ice politics. Accidents are forgivable. Waste, less so. You sit near the edge of the courtyard and study the basin again. The ice is already half its size. In just an hour, it will be gone. What remains will be puddles, footprints, and the memory of cold lips and envy. You tilt your head back. The stars are beginning to blink into the sky. You imagine the moon watching all this, a little amused. After all, it controls tides and madness, but even it can't keep a block of ice solid in summer. You hear a conversation nearby. They say the Minister of Justice stores ice into chambers now, too. Greedy. Not greedy clever. He uses one to cool food, the other to host guests. You smile. Dual-purpose chilling. Brilliant. There's even a fringe tale, whispered by a few, that one royal concubine had an entire room lined with frozen river stones, smuggled in during winter. She would lie naked on the stone during the hottest nights, claiming it helped her dream more vividly. You're not sure if it's true, but you kind of hope it is. Someone plucks at a gaijun in the corner. The notes drift over the courtyard, blending with the sigh of evening wind and the slow evaporation of what remains of the ice. You close your eyes. When you open them, the basin is empty. The nobleman bows, the guests applaud politely, and everyone begins to leave, no one rushing. All of them basking in the afterglow of coolness. Even as the night wraps them in warm air once more, you rise and follow them, your footsteps soft on the stone. The ice is gone, but you carry its memory. The streets are quieter now. The sun has dipped fully below the hills, leaving behind a warm, pink haze that slowly drains into violet. Lanterns begin to flicker to life along wooden posts, their light soft and honey-colored. You wander through a village alley where the hum of daily life still lingers, pots being rinsed, screens being drawn, slippers scuffing across stone. And then you hear it grumbling, rhythmic, and clearly annoyed. Around the corner, you find an ox cart stuck in a shallow rut, a peasant, shirt soaked in sweat. strains against the cart's side, barking at his two teenage sons to push harder, not louder. Inside the cart, straw bundles, but one has come slightly undone, revealing the pale gleam of a melting ice block beneath. UV stumbled into the less glamorous side of the kingdom's cooling operation. Ice tributes. Here's how it worked. Villages, districts, even entire provinces were required to send offerings to the capital. Rice, cloth, dried fish, and in certain regions, ice, especially during peak summer. When the royal court demanded a constant flow of fresh blocks to replenish its precious supply, you watch as the boys finally free the cart with a grunt and a lurch, their hands sticky from melting frost. One boy looks at the exposed block and curses softly under his breath. It's already melting. By the time we get there, they'll throw it back at us. Double quotes. His father swats him on the shoulder. Then maybe run next time. You trail them a while, keeping your distance. The cart creaks and groans as it continues down the sloped dirt path toward a checkpoint. A bored official leans against a post, half asleep. He straightens when he sees the cart, squints at the goods, and makes a show of inspecting them. "You're late," he says, poking at one of the bundles with a metal rod. "It's still cold," the peasant replies, trying not to sound desperate. The official raises an eyebrow, then opens the bundle. A small puddle is already forming beneath the block. He sighs dramatically. "This one's half gone. You'll only get half credit, but we left before sunrise." "Not my problem. The king doesn't drink lukewarm water." The peasant says nothing. He just nods, accepts the stamp on his paperwork, and trudges on. The boys' exchange looks tired, embarrassed, maybe a little angry. Historians note that the ice tribute system was fraught with tension. On one hand, it was a point of pride our region helped cool the Queen's chamber. But for most, it was an unpaid burden. The logistics were brutal. No fast transport, no storage en route, and no tolerance for delay. There are records of peasants losing their entire season's grain ration because their ice delivery melted on the road. One particularly bitter entry in a local archive reads, "We gave them our winter, and they paid us with empty bowls. Some families simply gave up. They'd submit cracked blocks or half-melted chunks and accept the fine, figuring it cost less in energy and dignity than trying to please an impossible system." You pass a small tea house where a few old men sit grumbling under a fan. One of them waves you over. "Have you seen the new tax?" he asks without preamble. "They want to blocks per family this year." His friend scoffs. "Let them come carry it themselves." Another mutters, "They'd rather we melt than them sweat." You sip a cup of barley water offered to you and smile weakly. There's nothing to say. This is bureaucracy in its coldest form, literally. Yet, it wasn't all resentment. You turn a corner and find a small market stall selling court-style ice jelly, a rare treat made with a few precious cubes. The woman behind the counter explains, proudly, that her nephew is a servant at the palace and sneaks her leftover scraps once a month. She laughs. "They think I feed it to the chickens. I feed it to customers." You try a bowl. It's cool, slippery, flavored with plum vinegar, and sprinkled with roasted sesame seeds. A strange combination, but it works. Around you, others sit in the warm dusk, savoring their portions slowly, eyes half closed, spoons barely moving. You realize something ice was more than just a tribute. It was a connector, a pathway from mountain village to throne room, from poor farmer to high-born noble, from the land to the body. It was rare, yes, sometimes unfairly distributed. But when it lasted, it was shared. A young girl slurps her jelly and leans into her grandmother's side. "Can we make our own ice someday?" she asks. The old woman chuckles. "Only if the mountain freezes for us." You leave the market, heading toward the edge of town. The streets narrow and twist. You find yourself walking past homes with cellars dug beneath them. Small ones, private ones. Not royal, not official, just practical. You peer into one empty now, but lined with straw and smooth stones. These were for the lucky few who could afford the effort. Not to show off, not to gain favor, but to store just enough coal to get through one more summer without boiling. A man sits outside, sharpening a hoe. He glances up. "That one was my father's," he says, nodding toward the cellar. He'd cut ice from the stream, drag it home in baskets lined with clay. Did it last? The man shrugs. A while. Long enough for one or two good meals. It wasn't about lasting. It was about trying. And there it is again. The truth behind all this effort. This hauling. This chiseling of frozen slabs from angry rivers. It wasn't just about cold. It was about defiance. A belief that even the smallest household could steal a piece of winter. Carry it into July, and say not today, heat, not today. You smile and keep walking. The stars are out now. The breeze has picked up. But beneath your feet, in cellars across the land, ice is still fighting to hold its shape, and someone, somewhere, is trying to do the same. It's early morning now, and the sky is a pale watercolor of blush and gold. Mist rolls low across the valley floor, clinging to rooftops and curling into doorways like shy ghosts. You follow a narrow road carved between rice paddies and granite ridges, drawn by the hollow echo of tools clanging against something solid. As you crest a small hill, the sound sharpens. Scrape. Below, dozens of men move in synchronized chaos across the glassy surface of a frozen river. Their breath fogs in clouds as they swing saws, chisels, and thick iron tongs. This is winter, full, teeth-clattering winter. And this is the great harvest. You're standing at the edge of a scene repeated every year in Joseon, Korea. Once the temperature dropped low enough to still the rivers, the ice cutters part artisan, part laborer work quickly. No one speaks much. There's no need. The rhythm is everything. You step down the hill carefully, boots crunching over frostbitten grass, until you reach the riverbank. A young boy runs past, hauling an empty sled. He glances at you, grinning wide despite the cold. "We have to move fast today," he says breathlessly. "The best ice comes before sunrise." You kneel at the edge, watching. Two men work in tandem, one driving a long saw into the surface, the other anchoring a thick rope around a slab. The blade glides through the frozen water like it's paper. One final push and crack. The ice gives a low, mournful groan as a perfect rectangle floats up. The men cheer quietly. One of them cups a hand around his mouth and hollers up the riverbank. Another clean one. Nearby, younger workers scramble to position sleds, laying straw over the runners to reduce friction. Others heave the icy cargo onto them with hooked poles. Each slab is the size of a tabletop and weighs more than a man. But they lift them anyway. There's pride here. You overhear a man tell another, "This one's for the southern Tengu." The royal physician says their last batch melted to quick. His companion nods seriously. "Then let's cut it tight and even. Don't want the queen catching a fever." It's hard not to smile, as if one block of river ice could save a monarch. But maybe it could. Maybe it did. Historians note that these ice harvests were among the most organized logistical feats of the Joseon Dynasty. They were timed precisely, usually just a few weeks in the deepest cold of the lunar year. Miss it, and you risked soft ice. Start too early, and it wasn't thick enough. The ideal depth, 12 to 15 inches, enough to stay solid through summer if stored right. And oh, the rituals. Officials would visit the riverbanks in formal dress, accompanied by scribes and monks. A symbolic bowl of warm water might be poured at the river's edge to honor the spirit of winter, while drummers played low, steady beats to keep time and, perhaps, ward off frostbite with rhythm. You watch a group of workers form a line, handing off ropes and tools with the fluidity of a centuries-old dance. Their feet are wrapped in cloth. Their breath stings. One slips and falls, but laughs it off as he's yanked up by two others. But there's urgency beneath the camaraderie. Every hour that passes warms the air. Every delay means more melt. And every melt means more sweat later when hauling double loads to make up the difference. You move along the edge and spot a smaller crew working apart from the main flow. They're slicing thinner blocks, almost delicate. You ask why. These are for the royal baths. One explains. They cut them special, easier to crush. You blink. Crushed ice. For bathing, he grins. For scented bathing, ginger or pine sometimes. Or for headaches. He points at a cart with woven baskets filled with powdery shavings. We'll mix these with herbs and wrap them in silk. Then the noble ladies lay them on their heads, like snow pillows. You raise your eyebrows. That's one way to cure a migraine. He adds, more quietly, also for love letters. You didn't hear that from me. You laugh. It makes sense. If you could send someone a note with frost still clinging to the paper in July, that's not just romance. That's power. Nearby, a boy balances on a half-cut slab, sliding across like it's a skating rink. A woman screams, waving him off. He jumps off just in time, and the slab is yanked free. The foreman mutters a curse and shakes his head. Kids think this is a game. He growls. But even as he says it, there's softness in his eyes. He remembers being that kid. You find a flat rock and sit for a moment, taking in the full view. Dozens of men working in harmony, oxen braying as they're hitched to sleds. River mist drifting like silk. The ice, glowing blue-white under a reluctant sun. There's something hypnotic about it. This isn't just work. It's tradition. Memory. Science married to intuition. A culture of cold passed from father to son, each winter stitched with sweat and slivers of frost. Historians still debate the exact temperature ranges that allowed the ice to keep for months. Some claim it had to be stored between 1 and 5 degrees Celsius. Others argue that proper insulation, not the weather, was key. One obscure scholar even insisted that ice survives longer when blessed under a full moon. Maybe, maybe not. But as you watch another slab hauled from the river, as the team cheers again, and the foreman scrolls a mark on his tally board, you realize it doesn't matter. What matters is that they believed it would last. You stand slowly and walk back along the riverbank. The crunch of snow beneath your feet steady and slow. The harvest will continue for hours, days. Even then, it's all about transport, stacking, wrapping. The real work hasn't even begun. But for now, winter is here, and the people of Joseon are taking hold of it, one frozen block at a time. By mid-morning, the river is behind you. The sleds have disappeared down narrow woodland trails, carrying their glittering cargo toward distant Tengyu, and the air already hints at thaw. You find yourself climbing again, this time along a stone path that hugs the curve of a dry ridge. Insects buzz low in the brush, but up ahead coolness returns. You reach a stone structure nestled deep into a slope. A pair of men in simple hemp robes sit outside, sipping barley tea and wiping their brows. One of them nods at you, then gestures toward the open door of the Tengyu. Still solid, he says, pride lining his voice. You step inside and the temperature drops as if the sun has been turned off. Your eyes adjust slowly. Rows of ice blocks stack neatly, their corners chiseled to perfect angles. Like sleeping giants in linen shrouds, steamless, silent. It's stunning. Most of them have survived the long journey intact. You walk carefully, feeling the cold rise from the stones beneath your feet. A small basin at the center catches meltwater, but it's barely an inch deep. The preservation is working. Here, finally, you understand how this was possible not just through cutting or transport or timing, but through storage. Storing the unmelting wasn't guesswork. It was precision. Each layer of blocks is spaced just so. Between them, straw, rice husks, even crushed bamboo charcoal. You spot markings in chalk, dates, weights, destinations. The ice isn't sitting randomly. It's filed, catalogued. You reach out and press your palm against one block. It feels like pressing your hand into the back of time, beneath your fingers. The surface is slick but solid, its edges rounded slightly from weeks, maybe months of patient evaporation. Historians still argue over the true lifespan of these blocks. Some say a single slab could last 3 to 5 months if kept properly sealed. Others claim full summers were possible, especially in the most elaborate, double-chambered Tengyu. One forgotten monk's journal even boasts that ice delivered in the year of the tiger was served during that year's Chuseok festival. You can't help but be impressed. Behind you, a worker shuffles in with a small wooden box. Inside herbs and dried ginger. He selects a small block from the back of the room, wedges off a corner with a curved blade, and places it gently atop the herbs. Tea infusion, he explains. must cool quickly. We use the old ice, the tired ones. You raise an eyebrow. Yes, he nods. Each block has a life. Some are for medicine, some for fruit, some just for looking impressive. You glance around. That makes sense. These blocks are more than tools. They're characters in a seasonal play, each with a role to perform. Some lead, some fade into the background, some get crushed into poetry. In the corner, you spot a different kind of container. A clay urn sealed with wax and stamped with the royal seal. What's in that one? You ask. The worker lowers his voice. Fish, your eyebrows lift. Delicate fish, delivered from the coast. The prince's favorite. We bury it in ice so it arrives, like it never left the sea. And there it is, the other magic of ice. Not just its chill, but its power to pause, to freeze time, so that strawberries picked in spring could appear in the palace during summer, so that medicine brewed in early winter still held its potency, so that food so fragile, so fleeting might arrive unchanged. There's a record of this in court annals. One entry describes a winter carp caught in the north and delivered weeks later, still firm and fragrant, to a banquet in the capital. The nobles were reportedly so amazed. They toasted to the fishermen's ancestors. Another servant arrives, pushing a small wheeled cart. She checks her list and retrieves a chunk from the top shelf tagged secondary malt. Not good enough for food, but still cold enough for footbaths, she says. Apparently, the Queen Mother insists on cold foot soaks during meditation. Keeps her from drifting off. A tiny smile plays on your lips. Cold, used to battle boredom. Who knew? You step deeper into the chamber. It's colder here noticeably. The walls have been reinforced with a layer of mud and crushed stone. You spot a tiny wooden hatch near the ceiling, an air vent, likely opened at night to allow cool air in, then closed before dawn. Every part of this place is intentional. Nothing is accidental. The builders weren't just storing winter, they were crafting a performance. One that started in January and lasted well into the hottest days of August. And the performance didn't end here. You remember seeing small pouches in the marketplace, bundles sewn tightly and kept cold in community cellars. Households with access to Tainu would often share, renting out space to neighbors, trading time and frost for grain or labor. It wasn't always official. It didn't have to be, in fact. A fringe tradition tells of families naming their ice blocks, treating them as temporary family members, symbols of protection or good luck. If one block survived particularly long, it might be blessed with incense or marked with a flower. Not all households had children, they said, but every household could raise a block of ice. Silly? Maybe. But as you lean against the smooth, cold wall of this chamber, listening to the silence, you kind of get it. The ice is alive, not like a pet or a plant, but as an effort, a reminder, a commitment to resist entropy just a little longer. You return to the door slowly, letting the cold slip away from your skin like a departing hand. Outside, the sun still burns above, indifferent, but your core holds onto that chill. Behind you, the Tainu breathes and waits. The path down from the Tainu is quiet. Birds chirp lazily in the trees, unaware that beneath their roots, blocks of frozen river water sleep like buried treasure. You reach a fork in the road and follow the thinner trail, lined with low stone walls and overhanging branches. It leads you to a modest building tucked behind a thatched fence, simple, unmarked, but pulsing with quiet energy. A pair of servants pass you at the gate, carrying a small, sealed box between them. You catch a glimpse of what's inside a bundle wrapped in white cloth, resting on what appears to be ice. They don't look up. You step closer. This place isn't for food, or tea, or summer relief. It's for healing. Inside the building, the air smells of eucalyptus and charcoal. A low chant hums from a back room, where a woman stirs herbs in a clay pot over a slow flame. In the corner, a second pot rests atop a pile of shaved ice. Its contents something thick and paler, gently steaming from the top, yet cold underneath. A monk enters, robes damp from the journey. He carries a pouch of medicinal root and a strip of cloth wrapped around his hand. He fell, the woman says, gesturing at the patient in the next room, onto hot coals. You follow her through a paper screen and find a young boy lying still, face flushed, chest rising unevenly. His hands are bandaged, but his cheeks glisten with sweat. The monk gently unwraps the cloth from his hand. Inside, another wrapped piece of ice, packed with ground bark and soft powder. He presses it to the boy's wrist. The boy exhales. Here, ice isn't luxury, it's mercy. The woman explains that, in medical practice, ice was both miracle and mystery. Applied to swollen joints, it reduced heat. Used to cool infused tonics, it preserved potency. Sometimes, it simply calmed the spirit, but not everyone trusted it. Historians still debate how widespread the medical use of ice was in Joseon Korea. Some scholars insist it remained largely in noble or monastic circles, while others point to records of cold compresses used in rural households. There is even a note in an 18th century healer's manual describing how snow mixed with mugwort will chase the fire spirit from the blood. A fringe theory suggests that early Korean physicians viewed ice as an earthly balance to yang energy. Where fire was the force of action, ice was the force of reflection. A body burned with anger or disease, and ice slowed it, pacified it, returned it to harmony. In the back room, another patient groans softly. An older man this time. His forehead glistens. The woman wipes it gently, then lays a cooled cloth over his eyes. The relief is immediate. He murmurs something, thank you, maybe, and slips into a quiet sleep. You sit for a moment in the corner, knees folded beneath you. The sound of trickling water fills the silence. One of the sealed boxes is open now, revealing a compartment filled with chipped ice. A ladle rests inside. It's not for drinks. It's for cooling medicine. The woman brings you a cup of ginseng tea, cold, bitter, and earthy. It tastes like soil and steel. It wakes you more than it soothes you. She smiles. For clarity, the mind should be colder than the body. You nod and sip again. There's a third room here. Smaller, darker. You peer inside. On a raised platform lies a shape, fully covered by a white sheet. A bowl of incense smolders at its feet. The air is heavy. The woman joins you. He passed last night, she says gently. They will collect him at dusk. You swallow, unsure what to say. He was stored with ice, she adds, so his daughter could arrive. You understand now. Ice not just for life but for death. Not to preserve, exactly, but to delay. To offer dignity. A few more hours of peace before the body gives itself to the heat. There are records of this too. Royal families sometimes requested ice beds for the recently deceased, especially in summer, when burial rites risked being rushed by decay. The cold slowed time, gave space for grief. One document describes the death of a prince whose body was kept for 3 days in an ice-lined room. Visitors remarked on how his skin still glowed like rice paper. Another tale tells of a mother who carried her stillborn child in a chest of river ice for 2 days so her husband could return and see the baby's face. You leave the room quietly. Outside, a young apprentice sharpens a blade near the well. He glances up as you pass. "Do you know the coldest place in the body?" he asks. You shake your head. "The back of the eyes," he says, tapping his temple. "When someone dies, that's the last place the warmth leaves." You blink. He returns to his work. You walk back through the healing house's narrow halls, feeling the coolness start to fade from your clothes and your skin. The tenue you left earlier felt sacred in a grand way, an architecture of empire. But here, the ice feels personal, human, soft. It's not the temperature that stays with you, it's the silence. The stillness of a boy's breath as pain fades. The hush of a mourner preparing to say goodbye. The cold in these moments is not harsh. It's kind. You step outside, the sun now high but gentle. The path curves onward. Somewhere behind you, ice melts slowly in a bowl beside a sleeping child. Not everything can be saved, but some things can be softened. You leave the healer's house behind, stepping back into the heat that now feels louder than ever. The village is in full motion. Traders unload baskets of fruit onto woven mats. Children race barefoot along narrow alleys, shrieking like birds. Smoke rises from cooking fires, curling into the summer sky. But something's different now. You start to notice the little things, hidden signs of ice. A woman opens a clay jar and pulls out a cloth-wrapped bundle that steams slightly in the heat. Chilled rice cakes. A tea vendor pours from a jug stored inside a shaded hole dug straight into the earth. The beverage clouds the air as it hits the cup-cold barley punch, laced with crushed pine seeds. And then you hear it, a chorus of excited voices. You follow the sound to the edge of a market square, where a crowd has gathered beneath a canvas awning. In the center, atop a lacquered platform, stands a block of ice the size of a watermelon, slowly vanishing under the gaze of nobles and merchants and peasants alike. You ease closer. The block is perched on a carved wooden pedestal, glistening with beads of water, its edges already softening. Beside it stands a nobleman in vivid blue robes, hands clasped behind his back, face serene. He watches the ice as if it were a flame. Someone whispers beside you. He brought it from the capital, just for this. This turns out to be a summer banquet, a gathering of dignitaries, wealthy families, and curious onlookers, all assembled not to eat because they're hungry, but to see what others are eating and what it's been chilled with. You make your way between tables, each one meticulously set with plates of fruits, jelly, steamed buns, and herbal drinks. But at the center of each table, a small bowl holding ice. Real, melting, blessed ice. The kind that takes months to prepare and minutes to vanish. You watch as an attendant slices fresh watermelon and lays the pieces atop the cube. In the center dish, instantly, steam rises. A girl leans in and takes a piece, eyes wide. It's cold, she gasps. Her father smiles. Of course, you think I'd bring you to a banquet with warm fruit. You stifle a laugh. But this is no joke. This is ice as theater. A musician plucks a slow tune on a gaijum, while a host explains the provenance of the ice harvested under a full moon. From a river sacred to the royal family. He describes the storage process like it's a poem, wrapped in cedar ash, nested in pine needles, sealed in a chamber kissed by the breath of earth. You nearly roll your eyes, but it is impressive. Ice as a status symbol wasn't subtle. In fact, it was one of the most conspicuous forms of soft power in Joseon society. The elite didn't just want ice, they wanted others to know they had ice. And not just any ice, but aged, clean, unclouded slabs that had lasted through weeks of sun and miles of travel without breaking or weeping too soon. Historians cite banquet records, with entire menus organized around temperature. Dishes were paired not just by flavor, but by degrees of chill. Guests compared the firmness of cold jelly, like connoisseurs today might discuss wine. Ah, this one melted slowly, likely from a western. Tangu, good insulation. You lean against a wooden post and watch a woman carry a tray of tiny cups. Each contains a sliver of ice topped with shaved pear and a dab of fermented honey. As you reach for one, you hear two noblemen arguing quietly behind you. He claims his Tangu stored ice for 122 days, without even opening the door once. Impossible. He's bribing the inspectors. You turn away, smiling. At another table, guests are invited to guess the weight of an unwrapped block. The winner gets to crack it open with a carved mallet and serve the first scoop of frozen honey red bean paste. A servant bows low and offers you a cup of cinnamon punch, cooled with what they proudly declare is the last of the spring ice. You sip it. Sweet, smoky, cold. It runs down your throat like silk. A child stumbles into the platform and presses his hands against the block. His palms leave warm prints. A noblewoman gasps. An attendant rushes over. But instead of scolding, the nobleman merely chuckles. Well, now it's a shared experience. The tension breaks. Laughter ripples across the crowd. Still, behind the smiles and silk, you can't sense the layers. This banquet isn't about food. It's about display. About reminding everyone who can afford the unthinkable, and who must merely watch it melt from a distance. A scholar sitting near you mutters, "We used to measure power by how many horses a man owned. Now we count how long his ice lasts." You look again at the melting block. It's beautiful, yes, but also tragic. It exists only to vanish. Its entire value comes from its impermanence. A fringe story floats to your memory of a noble family who commissioned an entire poem cycle inspired by the melting of a single block of ice. During a wedding, 22 verses, each more wistful than the last, ending with the final line. The water returned to earth, but not before cooling the lips of love. You sit with that for a moment. The musicians change. Tune. Attendants begin clearing the tables. Guests exchange polite bows, perform lingering handshakes, and drift toward waiting litters and carriages. You stay behind. The ice is nearly gone now. A shallow pool clings to the base of the pedestal. You step closer and stare at your reflection. It's a little blurry, a little distorted, but there you are. For one shining moment, the cold was king, and now it goes back to water, just like everything else. You leave the banquet as the sun begins to dip. Your path lit by lanterns hung from strings between rooftops. The air smells of burnt sugar and oil, whispers of celebration still clinging to the alleys. But your mind is drifting far from noble feasts and melting centerpieces. You've heard whispers all evening, strange rumors shared between fans and wine cups. They speak of snow-cooled meditation chambers, of rooms hidden beneath temples, where monks sit in the dark, wrapped in thin robes, seeking clarity through cold. And, of course, of them the snow rooms. You don't know if it's true, but something pulls at you, a curious hush that tingles at the edge of belief. So you walk out of the village, past the last vendor packing up honey cakes, through a pine grove that rustles low like it's trying to remember something, and finally, to a hillside path that narrows into shadow. At the top stands a temple-old, wood-worn gray, its gates gently creaking in the wind. A monk meets you there. He's small, bold, eyes bright. He doesn't ask why you've come. He just nods and steps aside. You follow him through the courtyard, past a row of stone lanterns, and up toward a door half buried in the earth. It opens with a groan. Inside it's dark and cold. You step into the snow room. The walls are smooth stone, the air dry and still. Thin mats line the floor, but no cushions. In the corner sits a bowl filled with crushed ice and pine needles. The scent is sharp, awake. The monk speaks softly. Cold stills the body. Stillness stills the mind. You sit. Your breath fogs. At first, the chill nips at your fingers and crawls into your sleeves. Then, something shifts. The discomfort dulls. Your thoughts slow, not sluggish, just quiet. There are records rare, fragmented of these rooms. Tengu reimagined not as storage, but as sanctuaries. A few temples, far from the cities. Built underground spaces to mimic winter during the sweltering months. Not for ice storage. For mind storage, monks believed that heat clouded judgment. That in order to reach certain meditative states, the body had to cool, not freeze, just cool enough for the pulse to become a whisper. Some practiced sitting in the snow for hours. Others constructed chambers like this, lining them with frozen stones from winter harvests, storing them in sealed earthen jars until midsummer, then arranging them carefully before meditation. You look around. There are no windows, just one. Small vent near the ceiling. No sound but your own breath. In the far corner, another figure sits. You hadn't noticed him. He doesn't move. He could be a statue, and you feel it, that sensation you haven't been able to name. It's not cold anymore. It's presence. You close your eyes. When you open them, you're not sure how much time has passed. The monk gestures gently. You rise. Outside, the air feels heavy again, but your skin carries the memory of stillness. Your ears ring faintly, not from sound, but from absence. As you descend, the monk speaks once more. We do not chase snow. We carry it within. You walk back down into the world, but you can't stop thinking about the other room, because there's always another room. You've heard rumors of more. In the estates of retired scholars, in the estates of lovers who preferred secrets buried in ice, in brothels too rich for shame, where cool rooms were built to slow down time, desire, and sweat, icy dens for summer passion, where a chilled body was seen as luxurious, untouchable, divine. There's a story of a courtesan named Becky, who refused to meet suitors in heat. Her chamber was lined with snow-packed urns, and the air was perfumed with chilled plum blossoms. Men waited hours just to feel her fingertips cooler than silk. They said, a touch like evening dew. Some scholars dismissed the tales as fantasy. Others weren't so sure. You walk past a closed gate and see a flicker of frost through the cracks. A private tengu, a secret retreat. You realize that ice wasn't always public. For some, it was a private luxury, a hidden delight, a way to disappear from the heat without disappearing from the world. And always, beneath the whispers, the knowledge that cold is control. To be cool when others sweat. To still your body while the world races. To slow down. To hold time. If only for a moment. You find yourself back in the village, but the streets feel changed. You notice how many homes have shaded corners. How many shops have sloped clay floors, cool to the touch. How the smartest vendors set their jars on elevated stone pedestals, ancient cooling tricks passed down like recipes. Everything here is trying to be cold, not frozen, just cold enough. Enough to think, enough to be, enough to remember what it feels like not to rush, not to drip, not to boil. And you remember the monk's words. We do not chase snow, we carry it within. You wake to the low beat of drums, not thunderous, not festive, just steady like a pulse. It pulls you through the morning mist, down a pebbled road lined with wildflowers and banners bearing symbols of the royal house, cranes, mountains, and spirals that mimic wind. You've arrived at the Royal Ice Cellar Blessing, an event held once a year, quiet, sacred, mostly unseen by common folk. But today, you walk among them. The tengu stands proud on the palace outskirts, carved into a slope so subtly it nearly disappears into the hill. Its double doors are open now, revealing the dark, cool mouth within. A single trail of mist floats out like breath. Before the entrance, a platform has been built. Officials in formal robes gather in silence. Each holds a bundle of incense or folded scrolls. There are monks draped in grey, chanting low. The smell of sandalwood laces the air. The ice itself is already inside, stored for weeks. But today is not about the blocks. It's about the space that tengu as a living entity, a guardian of winter, a servant of the realm. You find a spot near the side and sit. The earth is warm beneath you, the sky a pale ceramic blue. Then a bell chimes once, and the ritual begins. First, the Minister of Rites steps forward. His hair is tied tight, face unreadable. He carries a scroll and unrolls it with reverence. He reads slowly the names of every official who oversaw this year's ice harvest, their titles, their duties, their successes, and though glossed over their failures. It's a roll call of effort, of names etched briefly into the great story of cold. Next, a servant brings forward a ceramic bowl filled with water river water gathered during the first snow of winter. It's poured onto the stone threshold of the Tengyu. The water steams briefly, then vanishes. This, they say, invites the spirit of ice to stay. You raise an eyebrow. Historians still argue whether these ceremonies were superstition or strategy. Some call them meaningless displays. Others claim they served psychological purpose, reminding all involved that the success of summer depended not just on hard labor, but on intention, order, even ritual fear. One record describes a year when the blessing was skipped due to illness or politics. No one knows. That same year, 3 Tengyu flooded. Coincidence, perhaps, or karma. Next in the ceremony, the symbolic sealing. A young boy is chosen usually from a respected noble family, though never the direct heir. He carries a tiny scroll, barely longer than his hand, inscribed with a poem to the frost gods. He kneels at the entrance of the Tengyu, slides the scroll into a narrow gap in the wall, then seals it with a smooth stone and a smear of sticky rice paste. This moment always feels heavier than it should. The boy steps back. Everyone bows. The drums pause. Then come the ice dances. Yes, really. A small troupe dances in layered robes the color of snow and silver clouds emerges. From the edge of the field, they move slowly, deliberately, arms outstretched, hands curling like falling flakes. Their feet barely touch the ground. One carries a folded fan painted with a single word, chill. The performance is short, maybe 10 minutes. Maybe forever. You feel the temperature drop not literally, but in your mind, your pulse slows. Even the crowd grows quieter. A final dancer kneels before the Tengyu and lays a cloth over the entrance. Not to block it, just to bless it. You remember hearing about similar rituals elsewhere. In Persia, Yakul domes were blessed with perfumed oils before each storage season. In ancient China, ice houses received incense and offerings of white feathers, symbols of purity. And in the Roman Empire, priests sprinkled snow over stone pits and recited verses to Neptune, hoping the chill would last through the harvest festivals. But Korea's ritual feels less theatrical, more intimate. It's not about spectacle, it's about stewardship. The final phase of the ceremony begins. Incense walkthroughs. The doors of the Tengyu are propped wide, and one by one, officials step inside. Each carries a stick of incense, held with both hands. They do not speak. They do not linger. They walk the perimeter once, bow at the center, and leave. You're told it helps the ice breathe in the blessings. A fringe theory from an obscure scholar suggests that certain incense combinations, pine, bamboo, dried lotus, had mild antimicrobial properties and may have slowed spoilage. There's no proof, of course, but you like the idea that science and superstition might overlap sometimes. A boy near You whispers, last year, the monk dropped his incense stick. They said it was a sign. You glance over. This year's monk holds his stick like it's a newborn. When the final official exits the cellar, the doors are gently closed. No nails. No locks. Just a thick wooden beam slid into place, then sealed with wax and a pressed emblem. You find yourself holding your breath, like it's a tomb, like the ice is sleeping now, and no one must wake it. After the ceremony, the mood shifts. People talk again. Servants begin packing up trays of fruits and bean paste cakes. Children race to collect discarded flower petals from the dance. You overhear one woman ask, "Do you think the Queen Mother watched from behind the screen again?" Someone shrugs. "She hasn't missed one in 20 years. You stay a little longer, watching the tenue from a distance. It looks no different. Just stone, just doors, but it feels different. It's been blessed, and blessings, even symbolic ones, leave echoes." You hear one last drumbeat, a slow, final boom, and then silence. The cold, for now, is sealed. The next morning dawns thick and hazy, the kind of heat that clings before you've even dressed. That settles in your chest like a damp towel. But the village is already stirring, vendors opening shutters, chickens squawking, and somewhere nearby, someone swearing under their breath. You follow the commotion past the square, around the back of a warehouse, where 3 men are huddled around a half-smashed crate. Ice chips scatter across the dirt like broken glass. The air above the wreckage shimmers. "Gone," one mutters. "Sabotaged," another spits. "It was fine last night." You blink. Did someone really destroy a block of ice on purpose? You step back, unnoticed, and listen. It's not just this crate. It's been happening for weeks, someone says. At first, they thought it was poor storage heat leakage, a faulty cover, maybe a lazy servant. But now, too many failures, too close together, and always near important events. The magistrate's daughter's wedding, the summer temple feast, last week's medicine delivery. They suspect foul play, and just like that, your walk through the world of ice shifts. Because it turns out even something as silent, as innocent, as a block of frozen water can be a weapon. Ice wasn't just a luxury. It was a tool, a currency, and, in the right hands, a lever. Destroy someone's supply? Ruin a banquet? Insult a noble? Turn favor into embarrassment? Or worse, destroy their trust. There is a record of one incident, 1728. The royal archivist Estengu lost 2/3 of its ice to what was claimed to be a structural accident. But whispers spread quickly that it had been no accident, that a rival faction had bribed a foreman to leave the vent open during the hottest week of summer. The result? Missed deliveries, embarrassment at court, a rare scolding from the queen herself. The archivist's influence waned. Slowly, icy fingers reaching into every ledger he once controlled. You wander toward the magistrate's house, where servants are scurrying around a courtyard. A wagon stands open, empty. The guards are fuming. The head servant repeats that the melt rate was unnatural. Inside, the magistrate sits stiffly at his desk. A plate of fruit sweats beside him. You can see it in his eyes, panic held behind formality. Without ice, the balance tips. The guards whisper about a rival family about recent arguments over rice allotments, about the fact that the magistrate's son is due to marry a girl from the east where, coincidentally, the new Tengyu have just been built. Coincidence? Historians have noted a sudden spike in Tengyu funding during certain political periods, particularly when appointments to court were about to shift. In one cycle, 12 new cellars were commissioned in under a year. Some say it was about preparation. Others, that it was a race for advantage. More cold meant more control. And where there's control, there's sabotage. You hear of a case where a servant was caught tampering with straw insulation. Nothing obvious, just shifting the layers, just enough to introduce slow melt. It would take days to notice. By then, it would be too late. He was flogged publicly. Another record tells of a merchant who stored his summer medicine in a shared Tengyu. When he fell out of favor with the cellar's owner, he found all his wrapped ice accidentally delivered to the fishmongers instead. And then there were the accusations unproven, but deeply whispered that certain nobles arranged meltings, that they used seduction, bribery, or promises of court advancement to ruin their rivals. Reserves. One letter, recovered centuries later, reads, "Let his cellar weep before the feast. If he cannot offer cold peaches, he cannot offer peace." It's poetic, and petty, and absolutely believable. You wander now toward the communal Tengyu on the village's northern side. It serves several families. There's a quiet tension in the air. A woman stands with arms crossed. A man beside her explains in low tones that the chamber door was found unsealed, that the melt rate spiked overnight, that someone may have tampered with the vent flap. She doesn't respond, just nods, slowly, coldly. Not everyone could afford their own Tengyu. Many pooled resources, built shared vaults, and took turns maintaining them. But when ice became scarce, when a feast approached, or illness spread, trust became fragile. A boy watches from the doorway. He says nothing, but you see the guilty twitch in his fingers. Was it him? Or does he just know who it was? Either way, he's learning something today. That power doesn't always arrive on horseback or with trumpets. Sometimes it melts quietly in the night, leaving nothing behind but puddles. Later, you speak with a stonemason hired to repair a cellar roof. He leans on his chisel and smirks. You think thieves steal gold? No, they steal delay. You frown. Gold is easy, he says, but ruin someone's ice, and you ruin their timing, their mood, their image. He's right, because ice doesn't just cool. It defines when, how, and whether things happen. A sick elder expects chilled compresses. A nobleman demands ice wine. For guests, a bride waits for her snow cake white bean paste molded around frozen syrup. If it doesn't arrive on time, the moment curdles. You remember the noble banquet, the perfect ice centerpiece. What if it had arrived cracked? What if it had never arrived? Would people have smiled so easily? You pass another house quiet, unlit. Someone whispers that their Tengyu failed weeks ago, that they haven't hosted anyone since, that the neighbors wonder whether they're falling out of favor, whether the family's resources are stretched, whether their future is melting. It's subtle, but it's real. And then there's the revenge. One woman tells you off the record about her cousin. who discovered her in-laws were secretly borrowing from her father's ice cellar. She waited until their daughter's wedding day, then removed just one block, the one meant to keep the bride's centerpiece chilled. The cake collapsed. The guests noticed. The whispers began. "I didn't break anything," she said. "I just let the heat do its work." You shake your head. Ice. Of all things. You once thought it was innocent, refreshing, even sacred. Now you see it clearly. It is a mirror. It reflects how people treat opportunity, access, trust. Sabotage doesn't need knives. It just needs a vent left open. You wake with a strange thought. How many other civilizations have done this? Dug into the earth, carved space for cold, and tried to hold onto winter longer than nature allowed? The idea of storing ice feels so uniquely Korean, so tangled in the hills and hush of Joseon. But it isn't. Not really. You step into the morning sun and head for the Scholars' Quarter, where you've heard a historian lives. A man obsessed with ice not just in Korea, but across time. His house is modest. Walls lined with scrolls, shelves buckling under the weight of clay figures, straw samples, even a carved Roman urn, half wrapped in linen. He greets you with a crooked smile. You want to talk ice? You nod. He claps his hands together, thrilled. Then let's begin. He walks you to the back room, where a huge map stretches across the wall. Lines and dots trace ice structures across continents. He taps a dome shape in Iran. The Persians, he begins. Yakul, literally, ice pit. They built these enormous, above-ground domes from a special mud mix that resisted heat, thick walls, sometimes to meters wide, vents to release warm air, and beneath massive storage chambers. You squint. They didn't bury them. No need. They used geometry, shade, airflow, and during winter, they'd pour water into shallow basins and let it freeze overnight. Then collect it. He pulls out a scroll sketch one of those domes looming in the desert. It looks like a sand-colored spaceship. Some could keep ice all the way through the next autumn. You're impressed, but he's already moved on. Now the Romans, he says, tapping a point near the Alps. Snow pits. They'd pay runners to bring snow down from the mountains, packed it in straw, buried it underground, sometimes layered with salt. You remember reading that Nero liked his wine with snow, that guests were judged by how much snow they could serve at a feast. Sound familiar? The historian nods. They didn't have the tech for ice blocks, but snow. Oh, they had snow. He moves to China next. Bingjian, he says. Ancient Chinese ice cellars. As early as the Joseon Dynasty, royal families had entire ice departments, ice collectors, transporters, record keepers. They used bronze tools to harvest frozen lake water, then stored it in deep stone-lined pits. You blink. They had ice officials. Oh yes, he grins. And quotas. If the spring festivals didn't have chilled melon or cold duck broth, someone lost their job. He leans in. There's a Chinese text from 400 BCE that describes the perfect ice. Clear, silent, weighty. They saw it as purity itself. You glance around his room. On one shelf it's a model of an Egyptian jar. He follows your gaze. Egypt. No. To hot. But they made perfume storage rooms cool using passive ventilation. Like a cousin to ice storage. He steps back and taps the map. See the pattern? He asks. You do. Everywhere people have tried to fight heat. But not by overwhelming it. Not by conquering it. By working with it. Angles, materials, seasons, rituals. You think of the Tenyu again. How it curves into the earth. How it lets warm air escape upward while trapping the cold below. How it breathes, if you let it. You ask, but which system lasted the longest? He doesn't hesitate. Korea's. You raise a brow. He explains. Persian yakels faded with modern refrigeration. Roman pits disappeared with the empire. Chinese ice houses dissolved under new dynasties. But the Tenyu? Some were still being used into the 20th century. Quietly, privately. That surprises you, he adds. It's not about size or even temperature. It's about consistency. The Korean system was small-scale, yes, but sustainable, integrated into daily life. He shows you a chart. Heat loss per month in various cellar designs. The Tenyu is modest but efficient. It doesn't try to be grand. It tries to work. You lean back, and suddenly you see it differently. Ice storage isn't about dominance. It's about humility, about understanding that the world is bigger than you. That time melts things. That all you can do is slow it, gently. You remember that quote, "Ice doesn't forgive laziness." Now you think it means more than you realized. You thank the scholar and step outside. The air is warm again, but your thoughts are cool. As you walk, you imagine the different systems layered together: yakel, snow pit, Bingjian, Tenyu, each one shaped by culture, climate, and need. Each one reaching for the same impossible goal, to hold onto something ephemeral. You pass a blacksmith's shop. Inside, iron tools glint in the light. One sits beside a bucket of cold water. Steam curls as the metal cools. You smile. Even hear ice by another name. You follow a stone path toward a village elder's house. He's been sitting in the shade, sipping tea cooled with water kept underground. He gestures for you to sit. "I heard you've been visiting the Tenyu," he says. You nod. He chuckles. "My father used to say, other countries build palaces. We build patience." You ask him what he means. He looks into the distance. "To build a Tenyu is easy," he says. "Stone, dirt, sweat. But to keep it cool? To store ice through summer? That takes rhythm, discipline, and belief." He sips again. "We didn't chase cold. We invited it." You sit with that for a while. The sun dips slow. The ground hums with life. And somewhere beneath your feet, ice sleeps. Not alone. Not forgotten. Just waiting. The road to the market today is different. Louder, faster. Everyone is moving with purpose. Voices sharp, sleeves rolled, baskets bumping against knees. You follow the current of the crowd toward a small square where a rickety wooden cart rattles to a stop. It's an ice delivery, and in this village, that means everything. Two men hop down from the cart, each balancing a straw-wrapped block between wooden tongs. They work quickly, weaving through the bustle, calling out destinations like prophets with chilled promises. To the silk shop, to the tofu maker, to the doctor's daughter's wedding. You watch as one of the blocks is carried carefully into a shaded shop with painted shutters and a red banner above the door. A tofu vendor. Inside, women are already prepping trays, stacking silken cubes like edible porcelain. A child stands by the door, whispering to her brother. Mama said cold tofu means the guests will respect us. You smile, because this isn't about the tofu. Not really. It's about timing. The entire village seems choreographed around it. The cart arrives, and instantly the town syncs up. Water is drawn. Fans are stilled. Spoons stop clinking. The cold has come, and for a brief, shining window, it will shape everything. The tofu vendor rushes to cut the cubes into precise squares. Another helper dips them into cold water pulled straight from a clay pot, where a block of ice rests already sweating, but not yet lost. She explains that it must be served within 30 minutes. After that, the chill fades, and the dish becomes ordinary. Just soft food, nothing special. That's the truth of ice. It elevates the ordinary, but only briefly. You wander back outside, where the cart rolls onward. The delivery team is halfway through their list, shouting for people to meet them at the street's edge. A woman in striped robes arrives too late. Her name is called. Her bundle is gone. She sighs and walks home slowly, clutching a basket of peaches now destined for a much warmer fate. You follow the cart as it weaves toward the wealthier end of town. There, a servant from a noble household appears before the cart has even stopped. He carries a lacquered box, already padded with cloth and straw. He accepts his share with a nod, no words, no smiles. Power, you realize, doesn't need to shout about ice. It expects it. He disappears back into the estate, and you catch a glimpse of the cold being tucked away like treasure into a small chamber behind the kitchen. Historians note that while the royal court had entire systems for preserving ice, private noble homes created their own scaled-down versions. Not true tengu, but stone-lined cabinets buried into the foundation, insulated with sawdust and ash. Hidden chambers, cold closets. You've just seen one. It's there that the ice waits, not for display, but for utility, to cool powders, chill fruits, offer refreshment when a guest visits without warning. At the next stop, the cart team unloads a chunk wrapped in silk and marked with a blue stamp. Urgent. Someone says, you follow that block. It's headed for the apothecary. Inside, the air is already thick with ginseng and sulfur. Shelves buckle under bundles of dried roots and glass jars filled with mysterious liquids. An older woman meets the ice with reverence. Finally, she says, unwrapping it with a care usually reserved for infants or sacred texts. The block is placed into a shallow box, a bottle of medicine cloudy, green. Bitter-smelling is nestled beside it. This must be kept cold until sunset, she explains. It loses potency otherwise. You ask how long the ice will last. She looks you dead in the eye. Long enough. There's no room for maybes. And this is where things turn. Because while ice began as luxury, it evolved into necessity. You pass a girl holding a fan to her face, cheeks flushed. Her mother walks beside her, carrying a damp cloth soaked in ice water. She dabs her daughter's temples gently. The child sighs, shoulders relaxing. You see it now not as a miracle, but as medicine, as precision, the right cold at the right moment. For the right reason. You stop at a small cafe by the temple gate. They're serving iced barley, punch. A boy crushes slivers of ice against a stone slab, while his brother pours tea over roasted barley grains. The liquid hisses when it touches the ice, turning cloudy and cool. A cue forms. You sit and sip. The drink is simple, smoky, grassy, cold, but right now, it's perfect. Two men nearby argue over who will get the last bowl of iced radish noodles. One of them insists he put his coin down first. The vendor shrugs. The ice is melting. If you fight too long, it'll be soup. You laugh softly, because he's right. This, more than anything, is the tension of ice. You have to act. You have to move. Ice forces decision. It puts a timer on every moment. A hot day becomes urgent. A summer guest becomes precious. A delivery missed is a small tragedy. Historians once dismissed these deliveries as simple logistics. But newer scholarship suggests that the rhythm of ice in a town like this structured daily life. When it arrived, what time meals began, how medicine was stored, whether guests stayed longer or left early. You remember a court record from 1794. A wedding delayed by 3 hours because the second cart of ice failed to arrive. The bride's mother wrote, "How could we present our daughter in heat and sweat? She must be cool, like morning dew." Back on the street, the delivery cart is nearly empty. Only 2 blocks remain. The team turns toward the riverbank, where a small bathhouse sits under willow trees. Inside, a noble widow waits for her weekly foot-soak ice water infused with chrysanthemum petals. She says it's the only thing that calms her dreams. You watch as the last block is placed into the water, steam rising in curls. And just like that, the cart is empty. The delivery men sit on its edge, eating bean paste buns and fanning themselves. One leans back and sighs. "Tomorrow," he says, "we do it all again." You ask him if it ever gets tiring. He shrugs. "It's not about us. It's about the cold." You leave them there, resting in the shade, because the real work is already done. The tofu is chilled. The medicine is potent. The guest will sip a cool drink and feel honored. And somewhere, a woman's dreams will drift over icy water, soft and slow. You wake to shouting, not the playful kind, not market noise or festival cheer. This is sharper clipped angry. You follow the sound through the crooked alleys of town until you see the crowd. A circle of people stands near the communal well, where a boy kneels on the ground, hands tied, eyes wide with terror. An official reads from a thin parchment. Violation of Tengyu's sanctity. Unauthorized removal. Destruction of preserved material. Theft of royal cooling resources. The words are surgical. Cold. Around him, murmurs rise like steam. He took only a bowl, just one. His sister's ill, they say, still. Ice is not for common hands. You glance at the broken crate beside the boy. The ice has melted already, its absence more haunting than its presence would have been. Only a puddle remains, clear, innocent, But this isn't about what he took. It's who took it, and from where. Ice crimes, as they're called, were rare but not unheard of. And when they happened, they ignited something deeper than outrage. They sparked fear, because to take ice unlawfully wasn't just stealing it was disrupting a delicate social system built on trust, rhythm, and hierarchy. In the crowd, you overhear someone say, "He should have asked." Another snaps back, "He did ask." They said no. A third mutters, "It's not his place to ask." And there it is. You learn that the boy snuck into a minor noble's private tenue 2 nights ago. His younger sister was burning with fever, and someone whispered that a cold cloth could save her. He waited until dark, pried the door loose, took 1 block, just one, broke it with a stone and soaked the linen. She lived, and now he might not. Historians note that ice-related punishments fluctuated wildly, depending on era and class. For peasants, even suspicion could lead to lashings, fines, or exile. Nobles, of course, rarely saw consequences. There is a record of a royal cousin who hijacked an entire summer shipment bound for the palace. His punishment? He was asked to apologize in verse. But today, the boy's fate rests in this circle of sweat, silence, and protocol. The official steps forward with a bamboo rod. His voice is loud. 20 strikes. For breach of royal property, the boy flinches. You catch the eye of an older man in the crowd, face lined, hands trembling slightly. He mutters, "Let the ice melt, not the child." But no one moves. The rod rises. Then, from the back of the crowd, a woman steps forward. Hair pinned, sleeves spotless, gaze steady. A noble woman. "I'll pay the fine," she says, voice like silk wrapped around steel. The crowd gasps. The official pauses. "On what grounds?" he asks. "Mercy," she replies. She nods toward the boy. "He cooled life, not wine." There's silence. Then the rod lowers. The boy weeps. So does his mother, somewhere near the back. The noblewoman says nothing more. She disappears as quietly as she came. But her words linger. He cooled life, not wine. Later, at a tea stall, the talk still simmers. Was she wrong? No. But it sets a bad example, or a new one. You sip your drink, lukewarm barley tea, and think about what makes ice valuable. Is it its rarity, its cost, its ability to impress? Or is it the moments it saves? A fringe account from a court nurse tells of a time when the Queen Mother suffered from blood fever during the hottest week of the year. All court ice was rerouted to her chambers. Servants fanned the air while blocks were stacked around her bed. Her fever broke on the 4th day. Later, a ceremony was held not for the physicians. For the ice, a poem was written. It ended with the line, "Let it return to river." But no, it passed through divinity. You stand now near the village square, watching as children play with a sliver of leftover ice from today's deliveries. They chase each other, laughing, hands cold and red. One child holds a piece to his forehead and declares himself Prince of the North Wind. The others bow dramatically. You smile, because they don't see currency or class, just magic. But not everyone plays fair. You learn of a merchant who's been hoarding. He receives more than his share, no one knows how. Bribes, probably. or blood ties, instead of using the ice to cool produce or help others. He stores it in a locked cellar beneath his shop. Not for food, not even for family, for leverage. People whisper that he offers trades, a cube of ice in exchange for 2 sacks of rice, or a promise of land rights, or access to the temple. You pass his shop. It's well shaded, too cool for this heat. Inside, his son is sipping iced plum tea while barefoot children pass out from sunstroke to streets away. Justice, it seems, doesn't always flow with the meltwater. And yet, in the next alley, you witness its opposite. A woman lowers a basket into her community cellar and retrieves a bowl wrapped in leaves. Inside her last sliver of ice, she doesn't eat it. She places it gently into a jar of broth and delivers it to her neighbor's door. No fanfare, no witnesses, just quiet kindness. You stand at the edge of both worlds, where ice is hoarded like gold and given like grace, and where every frozen breath reveals not just who has, but who chooses to share. The palace today is hushed, not the ceremonial kind of quiet, where elegance hovers on each breath, but the real kind, thick, velvet, waiting. You follow a narrow corridor flanked by painted screens, each bearing cranes in flight, dragons rising over mountains, and one curious motif, a cluster of white, angular shapes on a black field. Snow, no, ice. The eunuch guiding you stops at a door, carved, lacquered, unmarked. This room, he says quietly, is not on most maps. He slides it open with reverent hands. You step inside. The temperature shifts immediately. Not cold, but cool. Intentionally so. The air is dry, tinged faintly with sandalwood and something crisp, almost minty. The chamber is small. A writing table, a meditation mat, and at its heart, a shallow sunken square lined with stone. The floor glistens with condensation. At first glance, it seems simple, but you look closer. Inside the sunken chamber rests a slab of ice, flat, smooth, half the size of a door. Around it, low walls carved from dense granite, polished to reflect light and redirect warmth. Small vents are tucked high into the corners of the chamber, angled to pull heat upward without stirring the air. Below the slab, a narrow drainage trough feeds into a concealed clay pipe. You realize something. This is a room built for the ice, not for writing, not for ceremony, for cold. The Emperor's ice room. You approach the slab and hear it before you feel it, a faint whisper. A crackle as water shifts inside the frozen block. It is alive in a way only very old, very preserved things can be. A palace attendant steps forward, bowing. This, he says softly, is where His Majesty writes summer decrees. You blink. The Emperor, ruler of the land, master of armies, keeper of harmony, writes his orders here, surrounded by chilled air, on stone cooled by a harvested winter. Yes, because in a world ruled by heat, clarity requires cool. Historians speak often of royal writing rituals. How emperors dictated beneath lotus trees or sipped chrysanthemum tea before addressing their people. But few mention the rooms like this built into private wings, hidden from grand tour routes. Used only during the hottest weeks of the year. The ice slab, they say, was chosen carefully, not just any block. It had to be clear, quiet, slow melting, pulled from a private tengu, often from the year prior, stored for this specific use. Some accounts even claim that the emperor himself selected the slab each year, after testing its weight and listening for the right silence inside it. You kneel near the edge, observing the writing table. Its legs are slightly curved, allowing for airflow beneath. A small basin under the desk collects moisture from the air. Ingenious. This isn't indulgence. This is performance enhancement. When the body is cool, the attendant says, "The mind is exact." He pours you a cup of tea cold, unsweetened, steeped with pine leaves. It jolts you slightly, not in temperature, but in intention. The room demands alertness, but not effort. It calms the pulse, so thought can rise. There's a story half myth, half recorded of a summer when the emperor collapsed during an audience. Heat stroke. He awoke furious, not at his advisors, but at himself. That night, he summoned architects. Within 1 month, this room was constructed, the first decree signed inside, a law shortening court meetings during the warmest quarter of the year. They called it the wisdom of cold. You walk the perimeter slowly, noting every detail. The incense trays are placed only on the south wall so their smoke would rise away from the ice. The walls are painted not in gold or red, but white and gray colors that reflect light and soothe the eye. There are no bells, no calligraphy scrolls, just quiet, engineered to perfection. One document from the Royal Archive notes that during especially critical decisions, taxation reform, foreign treaties, the emperor would sit in this room for hours, sometimes writing nothing, just watching the block of ice, observing its stillness, its pace, trying to match it. A scholar once theorized that this room was as much metaphor as tool, that by writing laws beside, something that must melt slowly, silently the emperor reminded himself that nothing lasts forever, that clarity must be renewed, that power, like ice, is both beautiful and fragile. You sit cross-legged on the mat. The ice glows faintly beneath a high, narrow window. Light catches the water along the rim, and the surface winks back at you like a calm mirror. You wonder what decisions were made here, how many names were written, how many laws started cold and spread across the country like cooling shade. There's an echo in this chamber, but it isn't sound. It's a pause, a rare thing, designed, protected. You hear a rumor from the attendant. Sometimes he whispers. The emperor writes messages not for ministers, but for himself. Thoughts he freezes on paper, seals in a box, keeps beside the slab. When the ice melts, he reads them again to see if he still agrees. You find that more powerful than any edict. Outside, a bell tolls soft, ceremonial. But in here, it feels distant. The room holds its own time, one shaped by water, one that listens even as it fades. There's a basin beside the mat. Inside it, petals float in melted water carved from the first slab used that season. A tradition. Some say it brings insight. Others say it just smells nice. You dip your fingers in. The chill surprises you. Not harsh, just firm. Present. It grounds you. And that's when you realize this room is not a place of cold. It's a place of focus. In an empire built on heat, noise, urgency. This room is the Emperor's only pause. He sits. He thinks. He writes, slowly, because the ice demands it, and the ice will melt. But before it does, it reflects the mind that shaped it. As you step outside again, warmth clings to your skin instantly. The air is heavy, thick with distant music, kitchen smoke, and the rhythm of sandals on stone. But something remains inside you. A temperature, a silence, a space where thought is still. And just beneath the palace, hidden in stone, a block of ice keeps breathing. You leave the palace with your head still full of frost. The Emperor's ice room lingers in your mind, not just for its chilled elegance, but for the way it made silence feel useful. Now, with the sun riding high and the roads humming with daily bustle, you start to notice the absence of that cold. The heat returns quickly, heavily, and so do the questions. Where did it all go? The Tangyu still exists, but fewer people speak of them now. The rituals are fewer, the ice carts rarer. You ask a passing merchant about the old ice cellars. He frowns. We don't use them like before. He says some were sealed, some just fell in. You press farther into the old district, where the walls sag and the earth feels looser underfoot. An alley leads you past a boarded gate where children have painted their names in chalk. Beside it, overgrown grass crowds the edge of a sunken stair. There it is, a forgotten Tangyu. You pull aside a curtain of ivy, revealing a rotting wooden door half off its hinge. Sun-bleached and split, you push gently. It creaks open, and suddenly you're inside a piece of time that was never meant to last this long. The air is still cool, barely, but enough to notice. The room is empty, no ice, no crates, just hollow stone and the residue of what once was. You step carefully across the dusty floor, your footsteps echoing louder than they should. Along the walls, markings remain, chalk measurements, tally marks, perhaps even initials. Faint memories. One corner shows signs of collapse, earth spilled in from above, burying what might have been storage shelves or drainage paths. A forgotten flood, or neglect, maybe both. You kneel beside an old vent now clogged with leaves and peer up into blackness. There's no breath here, just stillness. Historians sometimes call places like this cold fossils, structures built for function. Now fossilized in memory, they exist not for what they hold, but for what they meant, and what they tell us about what once mattered. You run your fingers along the wall. The chill is gone, but the design remains. Sloped ceiling, grooved floor, everything built with purpose. That purpose just expired. There's a moment when you wonder, how many Tangyu lie beneath this city? Beneath modern buildings, beneath traffic, beneath coffee shops with digital menus and free Wi-Fi. How many still breathe in secret? And what do they remember? You leave the cellar quietly. As you step into the sunlight, a boy stares at you, squinting. Did you go in? He asks. You nod. What's in there? You smile. Time. He scrunches his face. Is that a kind of treasure? Sort of, you say. You wander through the city, noticing now the traces that remain. A curve in a hill where stone once sheltered cold. A stone basin filled with plants, but shaped like an old drainage ring. A house with an oddly shaped bump in its backyard, possibly a sealed vault. Possibly nothing. It's strange how things survive in pieces. Later, you meet a man with grey in his beard and calluses on his hands. He once worked as an ice hauler. You ask him when he stopped. He shrugs. When freezers came, nobody needed blocks anymore. Just buttons. You ask if he misses it. Sometimes, he says, not the work, the rhythm, the knowing that something was melting, always. So you had to act. He taps his chest. I don't feel that urgency anymore. You walk together to his old neighborhood, where a Tenyu once stood at the center of 5 families. Now, it's a garden. Peppers. Squash. A fig tree. The cellar's foundation remains barely. Just a ring of flat stones now framing tomato plants. He crouches and touches one of the stones. We used to sit on this while waiting for our turn. My sister cried once when our ice melted too soon. You pause. What did your father do? He smiles, laughed, said, that's what ice does. It leaves you if you're not fast. You leave him there, staring at the fig tree, and you think, maybe these cellars didn't die. Maybe they evolved. Some became gardens, some became wine rooms, some became forgotten. But some live on in quiet ways like muscle memory. The way families still chill jars in running water. The way people still gather before the heat peaks. The way certain festivals still feature cold tea, poured slow, into shallow cups. You pass a schoolyard, where children chase each other with water ladles. A teacher yells, don't waste it, and they laugh. One of them drops her ladle, and the water spills onto hot stone. Steam curls upward. She gasps. It disappeared. You smile, because that's the truth. It always disappears, but not without a trace. Later, at a small museum, you find a miniature Tenyu replica behind glass, just 2 feet high, carved in stone, inscribed with tiny labels. There's a plaque, Tenyu, or traditional Korean ice cellars, once helped preserve ice through the summer months. Though many have disappeared, their design influenced later architecture, and their legacy remains in seasonal rituals, food culture, and our understanding of time and resourcefulness. You stare at it for a long while, not for the nostalgia, but for the honesty. Because the Tenyu were practical, but they were also poetic. They reminded people that the cold could be invited, but not owned. That time could be slowed, but not stopped. That preparation was everything and nothing. And now they remind you. You sit on a stone ledge, watching the golden haze of late afternoon smear across the rooftops. The heat today hasn't relented, it just changed tone. Less aggressive, more resigned. Like even the sun is a little tired. You fan yourself slowly, not out of desperation, out of rhythm, the way everyone around you does. It's no longer about escape, it's about endurance. And as you rest, you start to feel the shift, not just in temperature, but in meaning. There was a time when this heat would have been fought with saws, straw, sweat, and silence. When entire communities would pivot their rhythms around the hope of holding winter in stone. But now, that rhythm has changed. The Tenyu are empty. You walk again, feet dragging just a little, toward the southern quarter once home to 3 ice houses. You pass the remnants, a half-sunken door now swallowed by ivy, a windowless storehouse used for grain instead of ice, and an odd-shaped foundation under someone's laundry line. No one notices them anymore, except maybe the cats. You duck into a shaded path, following the curve of the hill. There, under an old persimmon tree, an elder tends his garden. He's shirtless, sun-darkened, humming as he weeds around a neat row of herbs. You greet him. He offers you water from a deep ceramic jug, wrapped in cloth and buried to its neck in the earth. It's cool, not icy, but respectful. He grins when you compliment it. The ground still remembers, he says, even if we don't always. You ask him if he remembers the ice cellars. He chuckles. I remember needing them. That's different from remembering having them. You sit together in silence for a bit. The breeze picks up. You ask him why the cellars were never rebuilt. He shrugs. We changed. Refrigerators, electric, fans, plastic ice trays. All quick, all efficient, all immediate, and all silent. The Tenyu taught us to wait, he says, to plan, to preserve. Now, we press a button. He leans back, hands on his knees. But pressing a button doesn't make you grateful. Carrying a block up a hill? That did. Historians have written about this shift. The way post-war development, industrialization, and changing technologies slowly rendered communal cellars obsolete. Tenyu became a curiosity, then a relic, then gone. But the cultural muscle they built, that lingers. You thank the elder and continue down the path. At a shop window, you spot a tray of cold jellies wrapped in banana leaves, displayed on a slanted stone slab soaked with water. The trick is old use evaporation to cool the surface. It works barely. But that's not the point. The point is that someone remembered. Nearby, a young woman gently fans her sleeping baby with a folded flyer. Beside her, a shallow basin filled with cool water reflects the sky. You pass another alley and spot 3 boys selling ice balloons, plastic pouches half filled with water, frozen into soft slush and sold for 2 coins each. They laugh every time one explodes. One of them shouts, "These used to cost 7 coins in the city." You don't correct him. Let the story grow. Let them believe the ice was once that precious. Because it was. Further on, you hear singing. A soft melody from a window, where an old woman hums as she fills a jar with summer plums. She layers them with sugar and what looks like crushed ice from her freezer. Not much, just enough. She glances at you and smiles. Cold keeps the flavor, she says. You nod. And the memory, she laughs softly. You've been talking to old men again. You laugh too. Because yes, you have. And they've all said the same thing. Ice isn't just about temperature. It's about timing, about effort, about choosing to preserve something before it slips away. That night, you sit outside your room, watching the moon rise. A jug of water rests beside you, kept cool in a clay jar. You sip slowly, and then just for yourself you drop in a small piece of ice from a tray you made this morning. It cracks faintly and cools everything. The taste isn't different, but the moment is. You think of all the people who came before those who carved ice in the dark, who prayed over cellars, who loaded carts before dawn, who waited for a single cold peach in the height of summer. And now you understand them, not because you need the ice, but because you remember why they did. You look up at the stars, and somewhere, deep beneath a forgotten house, a Tengu still sleeps beneath the earth, waiting for someone to care again, waiting to be cold. The next morning, you rise early before the birds, before the street vendors, before the sun has even broken past the ridgelines. The air is still, heavy with dew. You dress slowly, aware of the weight of today, because today you go to see the last of it, the last working Tengu in this province. You were told it's hidden nested behind a shrine, downhill from an abandoned orchard. You carry a small satchel of barley crackers and a flask of water, unsure how long the walk will take. It's not marked on any map. You pass a weathered sign reading property of the winter office. Faded characters, almost invisible. Behind it, a narrow path flanked by trees, their trunks wrapped in faded cloth, once ceremonial. You step carefully. The trail dips into a hollow, where the light thins and the air changes. You smell it before you see it. That familiar coolness, damp and calm. Not the manufactured chill of machines. The ancient kind, the kind that lives underground. And then you see it. Low stone walls, partially sunken, reinforced with fresh mortar in places and crumbling in others. The roof is heavy timber, shaped like an overturned bowl, layered with thick clay and moss. Two men stand nearby, speaking softly. They nod when they see you, neither surprised nor welcoming, just aware. This is sacred ground, you bow. They nod again. Then they open the doors. The air that emerges is sharp and quiet, not frozen, but deliberate. The kind of cold that feels like a choice. Inside, ice, stacked not in tall columns, but in shallow tiers, wrapped tightly in straw, each block labeled in ink. The oldest, 92 days. The newest, 3. One of the men gestures to a row of smaller blocks set apart from the rest. These are for the school, he says. They cool the children's broth at noon. Another row, medicine deliveries. We wrap the ice in lotus leaves. No wax. You walk slowly, carefully. This Tengu isn't ceremonial. It's practical. It works. But you notice the care. The wooden beam holding the ceiling is polished smooth. The corners swept clean. A single stick of incense smolders near the entrance, not religious, just respectful. You pause. Near the center block. It glows faintly, almost silver in the filtered light. The man beside you speaks again. This one is for the last festival of the season, the full moon ceremony. He doesn't elaborate. You don't ask, but you sense that this ice isn't for eating, drinking, or healing. It's for remembering. Historians have long debated when the final active Tengu disappeared. Official records list the last government-funded ice house as decommissioned in the 1960s. But across the country, rural communities quietly kept them alive, not as relics, as resources. French scholars argue that what killed them wasn't technology, it was forgetting. Forgetting how to wait, how to store, how to prepare for melt. You leave the cellar and sit on a low bench under the eavee. One of the men joins you, sipping cold tea from a wooden cup. People think we do this for nostalgia, he says. They're wrong. Then why? You ask. He doesn't answer immediately. He taps the ground with his toe. Thinks. Then, simply, because we still can, he hands you a piece of frozen melon wrapped in rice paper. It cracks in your mouth, tastes like silence. You thank him. You don't ask how long this place will last, or who will come after, or whether this block of ice will survive the walk to the temple festival. None of it matters now, because for today it's cold, and that's enough. As you walk back toward the village, you pass the old orchard. Apples hang low. A boy sits beneath a tree, fanning his face with a leaf. You hand him your last barley cracker. He asks where you went. To see the cold, you say. He blinks. Isn't that gone? You pause. Then, not yet. In the village square, a vendor chips ice into small bowls, selling iced hibiscus tea to sleepy workers. She uses a chest lined with ash. She smiles as she scoops. Not as ritual, just as rhythm. You sip. It's nothing fancy, but it's cold, and cold, now, feels like a story retold. Later that night, you open your window and listen to the fans, to the dogs, to the air, warm and thick, pressing against your skin. But under it all, beneath the dust and wires and glowing screens, something remains, a rhythm, a memory, a place inside the earth where someone still waits for meltwater to begin. Night falls like silk across the rooftops. A quiet, unhurried descent. You sit beneath a paper lantern, its glow flickering against the dark. The last of the day's heat clings to the stones beneath you. But something about the air feels easier now, as though the land itself has finally exhaled. You take a slow breath and look up. The stars are out fewer than you'd like, but enough. Tonight is your last in this place, and you feel it not like an ending, but like the final note of a song that hummed beneath every stone, every bowl of cold noodles, every echo inside an abandoned cellar. You remember the emperor's chamber, cool and still, where decisions were made beside a block of silence. You remember the thief boy, punished for choosing mercy over protocol, and the woman who paid his fine with nothing but calm authority. You remember the merchant hoarding ice in his cellar, and the widow soaking her feet in flower-chilled water to soothe bad dreams. You remember the children playing in alleyways with slush and giggles, knowing nothing of history, yet reenacting it instinctively. You remember the tengu, not the architectural specs or the precise angles of their drainage paths, but the people they shaped, the lives that bent around their rhythms, the quiet urgency they taught. Melt or move, preserve or lose. You sit with that thought for a while. Historians still argue whether the tengu were purely functional structures, or whether their placement and usage patterns signified something deep: ritual, hierarchy, memory. Some say they were symbols of power. Others say they were simply holes in the ground. But you've walked the stone corridors. You've touched the walls. You've seen the way people remember them, not just in books, but in how they fan their tea, how they time their meals, how they pass on stories to children who've never touched real summer ice. That's the truth. The tengu were never just about keeping ice. They were about keeping intention. Now, under the moon, you open your small notebook. The pages flutter in the wind, a bit damp at the corners. You filled it over the weeks with sketches, quotes, crumbs from the past. You write one last note. Ice is only magic because it melts. Cold is only precious because it fades. And then you stop. Because there's nothing more to add. In a house across the road, someone opens a fridge. A light flickers briefly. A hum begins. Modern cold. Instant. Predictable. Silent. You smile. Because you've seen the other kind, the ancient kind. The kind that required darkness, planning, hands hardened by frost and faith. The kind that tasted like patience. That demanded you move with care. That didn't come from buttons, but from belief. In a better summer. In a slower day. In the power of cold to soften heat not just on the skin, but in the spirit. And now, let's rest here a while. Let the streets grow quiet. The cellars go dark. The final carts roll into memory. Feel the weight of your limbs begin to soften, like blocks of ice losing their edge. Slowly returning to the earth. Let your breath mirror that rhythm. Cool in, warm out, cool in, warm out. Somewhere far below you, a stone chamber still holds the echo of winter. And inside it, not ice, but the memory of how carefully it was kept. How gently it was shared. How it was never wasted. Let that image settle behind your eyes. A soft lantern glow. A quiet floor. A single bead of meltwater trickling down the side of a block unnoticed by the world, but deeply known by time. You don't need to hold anything now. Not names or dates or timelines. Just the slow, melting truth of it all. That the world once stopped for ice. And maybe, just maybe, you can stop too. Let the fans hum softly. Let the air grow still. Let the memory of cold carry you gently, gently, into sleep, sweet dreams.